evening, I thought I would just hop on here, chat with you all a little bit. So, welcome. Glad you're here. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Be sure to hit the notifications bell. And the way this works, you know the drill, is I give my opening remarks, then you all have your roll call. I call you out as I see you, names and locations. Then from there, I write down your super chats and I answer your super chats, and that concludes our show. This is kind of a last minute thing. I just had a couple things I wanted to hop on here and say. Had a nice, peaceful day. So happy Easter to all of our Russian Orthodox viewers. I celebrated Easter a month ago as a Christian Protestant in the United States, but those of you who are Orthodox Christians are celebrating Easter today. So best wishes to all of you for Easter. For those of you who are Muslim and observing Ramadan, I say Ramadan Mubarak. I don't know of any other holidays that are coming up or happening, but if anyone knows any, I will happily give you a shout out for those holidays. Always want to engage and celebrate my audience, be it their religious or cultural traditions. So, folks, the way we're going to do this, be sure to hit the like button, be sure to hit the subscribe button, be sure to hit the notifications bell, especially since this is kind of a last-minute random live. It'd be great. It would be awesome if you all could tweet this out, if you could put this on Facebook, put this on Twitter, put this on Reddit, make sure folks see it. Should be good. And like I said, you shoot me a super chat. I will give you an answer. It may not be the super chat that you want, may not be the answer to your super chat question that you want, but I will give you an answer to your super chat. That is the policy. So, opening remarks, then roll call, then answering super chat questions. Then we're done. Then we go to sleep. And can't go too late tonight because I do have an early morning radio interview. It appears I'll be going on Sputnik Radio in the morning. I'll be talking with Shane Stranahan on fault lines. So if you're an early morning person, tune into fault lines tomorrow. Apparently I'll be talking with Shane Stranahan. But there you go. There you go, folks. So I wanted to just touch on a few things. The Biden administration is rapidly trying to get its foreign policy in order. They have a very confused foreign policy. They are a repudiation of Donald Trump's foreign policy. But as you saw in Joe Biden's recent speech, they're not exactly sure. BRG, left adventurism. They're not exactly sure what they want to do. There's talk of opening negotiations with Iran once again, and the Biden administration certainly was proud of the nuclear deal with Iran. On top of that, there is also talk of possibly opening up negotiations with North Korea once again, as we have seen. Now, we have to remember, as I have said many times, the Brzezinski strategy. The Brzezinski strategy of having the USA take a step back while manipulating the various anti-imperialists against each other. That strategy seems to be the prevailing viewpoint among the Democratic Party and Joe Biden's particular wing of things. And it appears that this kind of effort may be in the works. And we saw this, in the late Cold War. The United States made a big point of buttering up and getting friendly to various Soviet-aligned countries around the world, and thus creating distance between them and the Soviet Union. During the 1980s, the United States became very friendly to Poland, became very friendly to Romania, became especially friendly to China, the Sino-Soviet split, and setting the stage for the color revolutions of the late 80s involved a huge amount of overtures being made to various communist governments around the world, getting them to create distance between themselves and the Soviet Union, getting them in debt to American banks. I know Poland was just devastated. Romania was just devastated after the American banks got them in debt, and it ruined their economies. And that, Jimmy Carter made a point of being friendlier to Cuba, and that there was efforts to try and cozy up to some of the Soviet-aligned countries. All right. All right. Until cozy up to the Soviet-aligned countries, cozy up to them, in order to, at the same time, create distance between them and the Soviet Union, and also to destabilize and eventually overthrow their governments. And that this policy continued after the fall of the Soviet Union. In the lead up to the overthrow of socialism in Libya, Gaddafi and the Obama administration were getting closer and closer than ever. It started with Bush. Bush started cooperating with Gaddafi in anti-terrorism operations. And then under Obama, that relationship just exploded. The United States enabled Gaddafi to be head of the African Union. They could have stopped it by leaning on their aligned African states. They didn't do it. They arranged for the alleged Lockerbie bomber to be returned to Libya. They arranged for BP, British Petroleum, to start investing. Gaddafi loved Barack Obama, referred to Barack Obama as my little African son, and it was all a strategy for getting U.S. forces into the country, manipulating the socialist countries and other anti-imperialist countries that might come to Libya's aid to feel alienated, playing up the differences between Libya and the other anti-imperialist states, the differences that already existed, exacerbating those tensions, and setting the stage for a situation where the United States could destabilize and overthrow the Libyan government, and Libya wouldn't get international support in the face of an imperialist attack. And it was very, very successful. And this is how the game is played. Okay. Social liberalism. This is how the game is played. Recently, we saw an example of that with Belarus. Now, Belarus, socialist country, the communists are still in power. Alexander Lukashenko calls himself a communist. Maintains a state-run economy. Unfortunately, there's some homophobia there, and there's some anti-Semitism there. But overall, the economy remains the Soviet economy. They call it the last Soviet republic. It is very much a Marxist or socialist government, in Belarus, and the United States began getting friendly to the government of Belarus, playing up the differences between Belarus and Russia, playing up the tensions between the Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko and Russian President Vladimir Putin. The United States was getting friendly to Belarus, all to set the stage so that when Belarus had its elections, following the elections, there could be a wave of instability and protest and destabilization sponsored by the United States. The United States was able to basically suck up to Lukashenko, right, which was generally a Russian and Chinese aligned country and socialist anti-imperialist state, create an atmosphere in that state where distance was growing between that anti-imperialist country and other anti-imperialist countries, get U.S. influence in there, U.S. aid, and set the stage for this to happen. Now, right now, the same thing is going on with Vietnam. China has been awful to Vietnam. The Kampuchea War, where China backed Pol Pot and then attacked Vietnam, unbelievable, horrendous activities of the Gang of Four. And there are some disputed islands. There are some islands that Vietnam says belong to Vietnam, that China says belongs to China. And, this is on top of the fact that there have been thousands of years you've had Chinese and Vietnamese people fighting against each other, long before socialism and communism were a factor. There's just a long history of war and tension between the Vietnamese people and the Chinese people. And the imperialists, they know this. And so we have seen a situation where the imperialists have tried to manipulate the divisions between Vietnam and China. For a while, Vietnam was getting closer into the U.S. camp. U.S. battleships and military ships were docked in Vietnam. There was some talk of Vietnam maybe even hosting U.S. troops, but there's a lot of people in the Communist Party of Vietnam who realize that's what the imperialists are doing and don't want to go along with it. And there's also been a huge effort on the part of the Chinese Communist Party to, get over these differences and to be friendlier to Vietnam and to get along with Vietnam. But the USA has been trying to maneuver and manipulate the longstanding differences between the socialist country of Vietnam and the socialist country of China to manipulate them. And it appears that the Biden administration is trying to play this game. They realize that with COVID and the lockdowns and the USA still not being back to normal, it's very difficult for the United States to full on attack. So right now, the Biden administration, Biden is trying to get the country into a more stable situation. And at the same time, he's trying to give the USA the appearance of backing away while escalating covert work and efforts to manipulate socialist countries against each other. It's very comparable to what was done in the Carter administration. So I just want to make clear that that's what's going on, and we should keep our eyes on it, right? Talk about that totalitarianism. We should keep our eyes on that. That's really all I can say. I mean, there are definitely going to be some interesting moves in the coming months. It'll be interesting to see how the Biden administration maneuvers this. Will they make progress with North Korea? Will they get us back into the Iran nuclear deal? Biden came into office blasting Donald Trump as anti-Russian or as pro-Russia, and he was but then Biden comes in, and while he did put new sanctions on Russia in response to this alleged meddling, which we still haven't seen proof of, while he did that, at the same time, you'll notice that he did renew the START treaty, and he didn't do what the Trump administration did, which was rip up nuclear arms agreements, number one. You'll also notice that his tone with Russia has been pretty tame, pretty calm. He hasn't, just, been shrill against Russia. He hasn't been using any of the terms Hillary Clinton used. He wasn't calling Vladimir Putin the grand godfather of ultranationalism, and none of this kind of rhetoric. No comparing of Putin to the Nazis, none of that. None of that. It seems like the Biden administration is taking an interesting tone. Now, there was a moment where George Stephanopoulos asked Joe Biden, is Putin a killer? And he said, yes. And the reason for that was a direct repudiation of when Donald Trump, in his famous Super Bowl interview with Bill O'Reilly, was asked, Putin's a killer. And Donald Trump shot back and said, do you think this country is so innocent? And so it was almost like Biden had to make clear that he was on the opposite side of that, and he was doing a favor, to the CIA, to the anti-Russia faction, the anti-Russia fanatics within our government, making clear to them he wouldn't offer the same response Trump did. But it's been a very calm tone with Russia. There's talk of a summit happening this summer between Putin and Biden, and that's interesting. You would think that Biden would jump on this anti-Russia stuff. Now, what's also interesting is that the shrill anti-Chinese tone that the Trump administration had, Biden is continuing. As Biden was pitching his progressive economic reforms, jobs, infrastructure, it was all about, as he put it, winning against China in the 21st century. And that while it may not be as shrill as Trump, the idea that China is our enemy, the idea that China is our competitor, that seems to be very, very much a part of Biden's foreign policy. So we shall see how things develop. Now, there are foreign policy differences between Kamala Harris and Biden. Biden is from one of the more tame, chess-playing strategies, right? He's in with John Kerry. He's all about making deals and expanding U.S. influence in countries. A long-term Brzezinski-style chess game is what Joe Biden is playing. Kamala Harris, on the other hand, she is in with Silicon Valley. She is in with Anne Marie Slaughter. She's in with Jared Andrew Cohen. She's in with the social media giants, and Kamala Harris wants another Arab Spring. She wants to make the world go boom. She wants to light the world on fire. Joe Biden wants to play a slow chess game, and it appears with the situation the United States is in right now, with the pandemic, with instability, with the crisis on the border, that, I think there may be forces right now within the ruling class who might be more in favor of Kamala Harris's, global revolutionary upsurge. But they feel like right now the United States is in a weak position, so it would be better to play this slow chess game. But my prediction is that as things open up, as things in the United States become more stable, that we will see the rise of Kamala Harris, and we will see a different side of U.S. foreign policy assert itself. Right now, we're trying to get everything back in order here in the United States. We don't want things to become even more unstable domestically, and the strategy is to keep it slow. But I wanted to talk about a couple other things. Today was one of the first slow days I've had in a long time. Every day I seem to just go, go, go. I'm doing so much stuff, talking to so many people, writing so much, and web conferences and all of that. But today, got up. I was able to go to the gym and exercise. I was able to go and sit in my favorite little Mexican restaurant. And I actually had a chance to read the Sunday Wall Street Journal. I came across this article. Here, let me hold it up for you. The Rise of Big Data Psychology. I just want to read to you just a couple selections from this article from the weekend review of the Wall Street Journal from today, from this weekend. This is what it says. In the last decade, an entire industry has been built to predict a person's behavior based on their smartphone use and their social media and online activity. Because our search and social media history is digitized and time-stamped, it represents a permanent breadcrumb trail of thoughts and emotions. Tech companies and governments already use these data to monitor and commodify our likes and dislikes. Soon, psychiatrists might be able to use them to measure and evaluate our mental state. Our smartphones measure our movements with accelerometers, our locations with GPS, and our social engagement with the number of calls and texts we send. These data have extraordinary potential for psychiatric diagnosis and treatment. Nixon, Watergate, CIA. Wrote it down. Where were we? Studies have shown that the words we use to express ourselves on Facebook and on Twitter can predict the emergence of conditions like postpartum depression and psychosis. A person's recent Google search history, it turns out, is a better predictor of suicide than their clinician's most recent notes. Later in the article, it says companies like Google, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter already use many of these tools to gain an enormous amount of information about our behavior. But the interests of tech giants aren't always aligned with those of the individual user or of society at large. Using big data for behavioral health care offers a way to return ownership and benefit to the individual. Interesting, right? So, I have said many times on these streams that there is a huge amount of pessimism and hopelessness and discord and disagreement coming out of your cell phone, coming out of your laptop, coming out of your television. And many people have pointed out that Twitter is a place that brings out disagreements between people, rewards people for disagreements. The more you fight with people, the more disagreeable you are, the more attention you draw on Twitter, the more followers you get. Many people have also pointed out that social media manipulates us through addiction, right? That when you are rewarded on social media, When you get a lot of likes and shares, you get a dopamine rush. And that social media becomes an addiction because you are looking to get that dopamine rush. It has the same effect that gambling addiction has, roughly. Okay. So it says local DSA does nothing. It's like gambling, right? It's your behavior is being manipulated, and you become almost like a rat in a maze, right? We all know about those experiments with the rat in the maze. The rat is trying to get through the maze, sniffing for that cheese. If it gets through the maze, it gets to eat the cheese. The rat is chasing the reward, right? This is the experiments they do about behavioral control and manipulation, right? The rat, the mouse is manipulated, it's rewarded for good behavior, it's punished for bad behavior, and it becomes a lab rat in the hands of scientists trying to monitor its behavior closely so they can learn how to control the behavior. Right? This is the situation. And it seems like what is going on now is that we are facing an almost complete atomization of society. Right? Human relationships are falling apart. It's much harder to have a friend in our time than it used to be. People disagree with each other. People fight with each other. People feel alone. And as they unplug and disconnect from their family, from their community, from their religion, from their culture, as they become much more alienated, social media gives them the ability to commodify an identity, right? Social media celebrates what makes them different, not what makes them like everyone else. Social media makes them the center of their own life. And as they get unplugged and disconnected from other people and become more and more atomized, as atomized individuals, they become more and more part of the grid, the big grid, right? As you lose your connections with friends, you lose your connections with family, you gradually, more and more, become more and more connected to that grid, that social media, where you're chasing that reward of being rewarded with dopamine. And as you dissolve into the grid, they're tracking your behavior. They're monitoring what you do. They learn what you like, what you don't like. They learn how to manipulate you and how to get you to do what they want you to do. And while you lose these things that give you connections, these bonds in the real world, you become an atomized individual who then is subject to more effective manipulation. Okay. Imperialist nations art fact. Right? That's what happens. Right? So you become more and more controlled. And this is the danger of the time we are living in. The time we are living in is one where people are being broken apart from each other. People are being socially isolated. And as they become socially isolated, you would think that social isolation would mean more freedom. That social isolation would mean, if you're not part of a group, you're not part of a community, you can just do what you want. But it doesn't seem to work that way. Social isolation and social atomization makes you more and more subject to the covert manipulation of social media, right? As you lose real relationships, real bonds, real communities, and you become more and more simply connecting to the world through Facebook, through social media, through the internet, through Twitter, through Instagram. As that happens, the more certain folks are able to manipulate you. And the more dependent on that dopamine rush you become. You don't get the rush of having a community to be part of. You don't get the rush of seeing a real friend or a real real comrade or a real, someone you associate with. So that dopamine rush you get from social media becomes more and more valuable. If you're not getting it, your whole day is ruined. So you will do more and more, and you'll make more and more sacrifices in order to get that dopamine rush. Right? This is the game they are playing. And the only way to fight back against this strategy of breaking us all down into atomized, manipulated, addicted rats in a maze, the only way to fight back against it is to build a community. To build a community. To reestablish those bonds. To reestablish those connections that are missing from our society. The only way to really fight back against this strategy for social control and manipulation and reducing people to financial calculations, to rats in their maze, is to build community. The answer is brotherhood. The answer is sisterhood. And ultimately, the answer is comradeship. Comradeship. And that's why I am working so hard to build the Center for Political Innovation. We've got some meetups coming up. I'm very excited about that. Team building activities is going to be very important. People connecting to other people. People getting to know other people. People hearing other people. People knowing and listening to other people. Learning to feel their feelings. To celebrate with them. To laugh with them. To cry with them. This connection. These social connections that are being atomized and broken down by our society have got to be rebuilt. They've got to absolutely be rebuilt. This is the only way we can really flourish. And part of that is detoxing, taking a break from Facebook, taking a break from Twitter, taking a break from social media. Part of that, as much as I might sound like a hypocrite because I'm on social media saying this, I'm streaming all the time these days. Part of that is going to be detoxing. It's going to be taking a few days to take your cell phone and turn it off. Just turn it off. Turn it off so that you can connect to other people, so that you can really hear their voice. Not their voice filtered through your little social media individual crafted universe, but so you can just hear their voice. And learning to listen in a new way. There's something they call deep listening. I don't know if folks are familiar with deep listening, right? But generally when we listen to other people, we hear what they are saying. And we bring with us all of our assumptions, all of our judgments, all of our previous experiences, our own agenda, what we want to achieve through the conversation. And so we don't really hear them. But deep listening is a skill. It's a very important skill. Deep listening is when you sit with someone and you just hear the words come out of their mouth. And you put all judgment aside. You put all agenda that you might have aside. And you just hear the words come out of their mouth. And you listen to the words and you take them in. Deep listening. And part of deep listening is learning to not only listen to what is being said verbally, but also listen to what is being said non-verbally. To hear the feelings behind those words, right? To see the way the eyes move, to see the facial expressions, to not only hear the words that are said, but hear what is behind those words. And to put all judgment aside and just listen to the other person and listen to them in a deep way that allows you to really hear what the person has to say. It can be a beautiful experience. If you can learn to deep listen to another person, it can be very fulfilling. You can really connect with another person. I think that should ultimately be one of our goals. We've got to build community. We've got to break out from the matrix, break out from the cage that these folks have set up from us. We got to build community, build real bonds between people, and That's really all we can do. I mean, it's not all we can do. Right? I've talked many times about the difference between a friend and a comrade. Right? A friend is somebody that you associate with. You have them in your life, you value them, they value you, you have some kind of bond. But a comrade is different than a friend. A comrade is someone with whom you engage in struggle. Soldiers in the military are comrades. Police officers are comrades. And communists have generally greeted each other by saying comrade, because camaraderie denotes a special kind of relationship. It's not a friend necessarily, it could be friendship. It's not romantic, it's not simply an acquaintance, you're not a colleague, it's not like you're on the job together, you're not in business together. But a comrade is somebody with whom you stand arm in arm and struggle, and it is a very unique and special relationship to have a comrade. To have a comrade is a very unique and special relationship, and that is the kind of relationship that communists have cultivated throughout the history of our movement. We've cultivated comradely relationships, and those comradely bonds, people who engage in struggle together, a struggle that they fully believe in with all their heart and soul. They're not conscripted, they're not drafted, they're voluntarily giving their life to engage in struggle. To develop that kind of bond, that comradeship bond, is a genuinely beautiful thing. It is genuinely very, very beautiful. And my hope is that as the Center for Political Innovation develops, we can build a community that can push back against the atomization and manipulation of capitalist society and give people back their humanity. Rescue people from the state of being manipulated, atomized individuals, and give them a bond with which they can develop comradeship and struggling for a better future. That is what I'm trying to do. And by all means, if you disapprove of that, I give you absolute right to do that. Give you absolute right to do that. Writing it down, social media and CIA. And you have the right to disagree with me. At the end of the day, I am illiberal. I'm not right-wing. I'm not a conservative. I believe in historical progress. I believe in socialism. I believe history is marching forward. I believe in the rights of LGBT people and the rights of women. And, I'm not trying to reconstruct medieval hierarchies or oppress people for being who they are. So I am on the left, but I am illiberal because liberalism is the ideology that dominates the Western world and says individualism comes above all else. There is social liberalism, which is breaking down a sense of loyalty to community, a sense of loyalty to the country, a sense of social obligation, of family, etc. And then there is economic liberalism, which is called libertarianism, breaking down economic obligation, allowing corporations and big banks to do whatever they want, lifting the protections for workers, lifting the tariffs that restrict where corporations can do business, allowing corporations to just pursue profits nakedly. That is economic liberalism. And economic and social liberalism, they're two sides of the same coin. The Republican Party emphasizes economic liberalism while giving demagogic support to social conservatism. The Democratic Party emphasizes social liberalism while demagogically, putting forward occasional, populist economic demands, better minimum wage, supporting unions, but not really carrying it out. These are two sides of the same coin. And the goal is ultimately atomization. Break down any sense of community, break down any sense of loyalty, break down any sense of brotherhood or sisterhood or comradeship. Allow the rich to do whatever they want to pursue their own profits, and let average people just be on their own. You're on your own. You're on your own. It's you against the world, and that is the future that they offer for us. That is the ideology of liberalism. Marxism and socialism are post-liberal ideologies. They are illiberal ideologies. They say that, no, you're not only an atomized individual. Yes, the patriarchal structures of the past. I don't even know what that word means, Pierre. And yes, of course, people are going to take this out of context. Who cares, right? No matter what I say, they take it out of context. Of course, We're not for upholding medieval hierarchies. We're not for going back to feudalism. We're not for, oppressing people. But we also don't believe in just naked, atomized individualism. We believe in collectivism, in the brotherhood and solidarity of all mankind, in a society where people are cared for, in which there is a common bond that holds people together, and there is affection and kindness between people, and people aren't reduced to mere financial calculations, where there is more of a nexus remaining between man and man than mere callous cash payment, right? You read the Communist Manifesto. Marx condemns capitalism for creating a world where money comes first and human beings are basically stripped of any spiritual value. Now, Marx himself was a scientific atheist, but he seemed to understand that capitalism was creating a spiritual vacuum where people were reduced to an existence that was painful and lonely. And, this comes across, this is the same thing. The same thing. Okay, society revolves around money. This is the same thing that Mary Shelley is writing about in Frankenstein, her novel. This is the same thing that Durkheim was observing in his early works of sociology, where he studied rural people who moved to industrial cities and became very, very lonely and hopeless. Right? This is the exact same phenomenon. Right? This is what capitalism does. And pushing back against capitalism means building community. That's what it means. So I'm here to tell you that the hope for the future is in building community. And I also just want to end by making this point. Again, I've made this point before, but it must be made. How can you spot a grifter? How can you spot a grifter? Easy. A grifter only tells you things that you want to hear. Right? A grifter wants to grift you. He wants your money. He wants your support. He doesn't want to take any risks. So a grifter, censorship and socialism, a grifter only tells you things that he's sure you want to hear. But how can you spot a serious revolutionary? Listen to the speeches of Malcolm X. Many times in the speeches of Malcolm X, he's saying, I know you don't want to hear this, but. Malcolm X is not grifting his audience. Malcolm X is telling them things that they do not want to hear, but that they need to hear. A grifter tails after the audience. He says things that the audience already kind of sort of believes in the hopes that the audience will say, wow, and hand over some bucks. But a revolutionary is not a tailist. A revolutionary is not bowing to spontaneity. A revolutionary is the opposite. A revolutionary tells you things that you do not know. A revolutionary tells you things that you do not already believe. A revolutionary tries to convince you of things that you don't want to believe, that you may find hard to believe at first. A revolutionary challenges you, forces you to face things you do not want to face, and puts forward solutions that you may not be ready to consider. A grifter runs behind the people. A revolutionary stands ahead of the people. That is the difference. I don't know who that is. Chaya. That is the difference. And there's a lot of grifters on the internet. There's a lot of grifters on the internet. But I'm here to tell you things that you don't want to hear. I'm here to make you aware of realities that you don't want to face. And I'm here to offer you solutions that you may not be ready to receive. That's what I'm here to do. And that's why I continue to push the envelope. I've talked to you all about why we shouldn't say abolish billionaires, because the goal of socialism is a world with so much abundance that the state withers away. And if you cap abundance at $1 billion, then you haven't done that. We are against exploitation, but we are not against wealth, and we are not against abundance. We are against exploitation. We're against how the wealth is created in a capitalist system. right? I've said that to you. I've said to you that the socialist and communist movement in the United States is ineffective. It's isolated. It views average Americans with contempt. It does not speak in language that people can understand. And I've said that if we want to be serious, we need to get out of the movement and get to the masses. I've said that there are millions of people who became Trump supporters because the left failed, and that rather than canceling these people, it is our duty as leftists to get them to understand that what they are angry about is rooted in capitalism and win them away from racism to socialism. I have said on these lives that we need to get over this contempt of average Americans, this belief that average Americans are the enemy. We need to get over this desire to just sit on social media and feel good about ourselves. And we need to get over this desire to release impulses, this desire to, tear things down. And that socialism is about achieving that feeling of oneness, called personality, right? That's what socialism is ultimately about. Is about achieving that feeling of oneness, and that the remnants of the Cultural Revolution, the remnants of the French Revolution in our movement, that explosion of rage and violence, mixed in with sexuality, right? The Marquis de Sade syndrome. That is a curse hanging over our movement. And some of the grossest and ugliest things that have happened in the history of socialism have been a result of that holdover. And that, this isn't the 1700s anymore, right? We're not fighting to rip apart feudalism. Capitalism rips people apart already. We're fighting to build community. We're fighting to build solidarity. We're fighting to bring love into the world. And that means not just the endless releasing of impulses, but rather the building of bonds, the building of communities. So I have a conception on here that's consistent with what I've written in my book, City Builders and Vandals in Our Age. I have a conception on here that's a little bit different than what you're going to hear in the rest of the organized political left. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that because I'm here to say what needs to be said. Look, I've got a job, folks. I've got a job, got a career, got an apartment, got a wife. Thank you, T-Mac. I mean, if I was just on here to try and make a buck, things might be different. I do these lives because I feel deeply passionate about what I'm saying, and because no one is saying what needs to be said. I do these lives because the emperor has no clothes. The emperor is walking around naked, but we have a society full of people that are too afraid to tell the emperor he has no clothes. Well, the emperor has no clothes, and someone's got to be the one to stand up and tell the emperor, "Sir, you have no clothes on. You got ripped off by a grifter who told you he was selling you invisible clothes," right? The emperor has no clothes, and it needs to be said. Socialism is not a worker cooperative. It's not an employee stock ownership program, and it's not everyone getting free health care from the government. Socialism is a whole new society where the banks and the factories and the major industries and the economy overall is organized to serve public good, not profits. That's socialism. Socialism is what turned China into a global superpower. Socialism is what made Russia into a global superpower. Socialism is what enabled Cuba to be known all over the world for its medical aid. Socialism has raised people out of poverty in Nicaragua and Vietnam and so many places. Socialism has been successful. Socialism has struggled, and it's come into the world in a quite painful way, and there's been plenty of things that have gone on in the history of socialism that are problematic and painful. But overall, socialism has been an overwhelmingly positive force in human history, and socialism will be victorious. Capitalism is crashing and burning all around us, while Eurasia is marching forward and anti-imperialist states are marching forward with economies where profits are not in command. That's the message that I have to offer on here. And it's interesting. Is it a political message? Of course. Is it an economic message? Of course. But is it also a sociological message? Absolutely. Is it a psychological message? Absolutely. Is it a spiritual message? Absolutely. We are doing things on here that transcend the general disciplines of normal conversation. We are having a wide-ranging discussion about how to save ourselves from the disaster unfolding in the world. I mean, what the capitalists are doing with their desire to unleash chaos and destruction and drive us all into atomization and poverty, what they're doing is very, very horrendous. And we are having a wide ranging conversation, drawing from many different ideologies and traditions about how to push back against this insanity. And we will prevail, and we will build a community. So that's, I guess, how I wanted to open my stream for tonight. That's what I felt like saying. So be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Be sure to hit the notifications bell. I've got plenty of unnamed orange beverage. And yeah, let's hear it. Names and locations, folks. Who's with us tonight? Names and locations. I will call you out as I see you. Names and locations. Who is here tonight? Names and locations. Who's here? I'll call you out as I see you. And thank you, Jenny. I'm glad you liked the opening remarks. West Palm Beach, Brazil. Brad in St. Louis, Belize. Long Island, New York. Chaya in Montreal. Truth to Power in Houston. West Palm Beach, Northern California, Texas, Chicago, Tasmania. Char Char Darling in Nassau County, good friend of the program. Jenny Lynn in Cincinnati, good friend of the program. Paragus in Los Angeles, Long Island, New York, West Palm Beach, Holly Horn in Queens, New York, Eddie from Houston, Gamer for Life in Northern California. Hi from Jelly, Screwdriver, I just named it. Okay, what does that mean? Crizzy Cruz in Glendale, California, Wisconsin, Henderson, Nevada, Sacramento, Temple City, California, Boston, Cole from Calgary, San Miguel from Allende, Mexico, Chicago, Sham Folk Punk in Cleveland Wasteland, Kansas City, Missouri, The Hood, Alameda, California, Lower East Side, Jamal, Joe and Merced, California, Gateshead, England, Arizona, Cupertino, California, Joshua Tree, California, Kinky, good friend of the program. I think I will make you a mod, Kinky. You are now a mod. Orange County, California, Terre Haute, Hi in San Francisco, Carlos from Mexico City, North Macedonia, morning to you, Caleb. Brazil, says Vinicius. Hello from Myers, Florida. Nate in Chicago, Sierra Vista, Auckland, New Zealand, Rhode Island, Frank in Rhode Island, Kolkata, India, like your morning chats, Valencia, California, Austria, Lechon City, Kentucky, Patrick from Los Angeles. Very good. Enid, Oklahoma, Chicago, Evansville, Indiana, California, South Africa. Congrats, Kinky. We Africa. Welcome to the Wrench Gang, Kinky. South Africa. David in China. Cleveland Pirate Alex. South Africa. Marks and Engels from the Afterlife. Nate Pano from Sydney, Australia. Outskirts of LA. Oh, thank you for the super chat, John Doe. Always appreciated. Keep Fighting the Idealists in Northern Michigan. Kieran Fatima in Toronto. Very, very good. Wow. Very, very good. Mo in Pomona, California. I think Kieran Fatima, I think you can also be a mod, right? The more mods, the better, right? There you go. And if I accidentally, well, never mind. Anyway, Pomona, California. There we go. Naples, Florida, Harold Sullivan. Welcome, Harold. Comrades moved to Oregon, USA, says Chuckles. Wow. Asheville, North Carolina. Very, very good. Boris, cool, thanks. Yeah, we're having a great time here, folks. Any other names and locations? Shaking up the unnamed orange beverage. It's just orange juice, but we say unnamed because we're playing the game of the unnamed diet beverage. It's a running joke conversation on these lives. Anybody else want me to call you out? Names and locations. Names and locations. I'll call you out. Red Illuminati is here. Welcome, Red. Kendall in San Diego. Howdy, friends. Well, howdy to you, Kendall. Tanara in Manhattan, right? Plumas National Forest. Caleb skipped me. He really skipped me. He says World Downfall, Earth AD. Well, I didn't skip you now. Jeremy Chase, Caleb from Montana. Well, we must have the same name there, Caleb from Montana. All right, there you go. John Doe, the Communist Party won in Kerala again. All right, we'll talk about Kerala. We will talk about that. Kerala Communist Party. All righty. There you go. Troy in an unnamed location. Ardi from Indonesia. Very, very good. Very, very good. I wrote down the Kerala Communist. Very good. What's new, folks? Anything else? Anything else before we go on to start answering our super chats? Anything else? There you go. JT24 is in Mississippi. Welcome, JT24. Always a valued member of this community. Always a valued member. My goodness, do I have to... JT24, I'm making you a mod as well. A lot of people are becoming mods these days. So there you go. There you go. All righty. Absolutely. Anybody else? Names and locations. Names and location. If you're on here long enough, I'll probably make you a mod. That's how it works. So there you go. Right? More mods, the better. All righty, folks. Shall we... all right, I will just start answering super chat questions. Okay. All right. Black Red Guard and left adventurism. Well, for those of you who don't care, which you shouldn't, you should not care about this, especially since the opening of these remarks. I just spent the entire remarks telling you how bad social media is. So now I guess I'm going to give you a concrete example of how bad social media is, and I'm going to tell you about something you should not care about, which is that I tweeted at someone named Black Red Guard the other night. The reason I tweeted at him is that he made a tweet talking about how a woman went by and said she didn't like Fidel Castro, an older Cuban woman who was right-wing, said down with Fidel Castro or something like that. So to own her, he blasted music from The Shining Path, El Sendero Luminoso, from his car radio. And I responded by pointing out that, this woman who did not like Fidel Castro and El Sendero Luminoso had the same assessment of Fidel Castro, because The Shining Path were vicious, ultra-Maoist terrorists who murdered pro-Cuban communists. They considered Cuba to be not really socialist or whatever, and in Peru, all kinds of people from the real Communist Party of Peru and from various Enver Hoxha and Maoist and anti-revisionist groups in Peru, and they were murdered by the Shining Path. The Shining Path is a vicious, vicious terrorist organization that, their signature was executing dogs. That was their signature, is they would hang a dog in front of your house to threaten you. You'd wake up everybody and there'd be a dead dog and you're hanging from your house. Really, really not a fun thing. They would execute people by cutting their heads off. And a lot of people didn't even realize they were communists. They were just El Sendero Luminoso, the Shining Path. Right? And people thought it was like a religion or something, because they worshipped Presidente Gonzalo, and they would have his face, these paintings of his face with like the sun, like halos around it. And it was just this weird, bizarre cult among the Peruvian indigenous peasants. They started killing people and torturing people and all of that. And they set the stage for the Fujimori dictatorship to take power in Peru. And one of the things that the Shining Path did was murder other communists. They bombed the Chinese embassy. I believe they bombed the Cuban embassy also, if I'm not mistaken. Just a vicious bunch of terrorists. So, all over the internet, I see people that are like neo-Maoists who praise the Shining Path. And I don't know why you would, if you're a genuine communist, and you cannot praise the Shining Path, right? They killed genuine communists in Peru. I've been to international communist gatherings and met with Peruvian communists many, many, many times. Many times I have met with them. And they all hate the Shining Path. The Shining Path is just considered to be not a good group of people. Not good. Not good. So, I figured maybe Black Red Guard, because he thought that he was owning this Cuban woman by blasting Shining Path music at her. I thought maybe he might want to be informed, so I tweeted at him and I said, well, actually, I replied. So then he replied to me and said that I was a literal Strasserite Nazi, which, again, literal, right? Now, for me to be a literal Strasserite Nazi, I would have to be really, really old, and I would have to have been heavily involved in German politics in the 1930s. And I noticed that this is one thing that Black Red Guard and his fans do a lot, is they use the word literal incorrectly. If they don't like you, you're a literal idiot. You're a literal, and it's like, no, the word literal has like a meaning, right? I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's just it's a lot of people do this, but they think literal just means like totally. They don't think that literal means like it means the literal meaning of the word. Um, you know, if you were surprised by something, you don't say your head literally exploded. Because if your head literally exploded, then what that means is that your head actually burst. You would say, my head almost exploded. I felt like my head exploded. But if you say my head literally exploded, you are telling someone that your head actually burst, right? So, but I feel like this Black Red Guards guy doesn't know what literal means, right? Now, if you want to allege that I'm a Nazi, you would say, you're a Nazi, or your ideology sounds Nazi to me, something like that. But when you say I am literally a Strasserite Nazi, I cannot literally be that, right? Literally means that I mean, it's just, I mean, and I get this, and then somebody else said I was literally a servant of capitalism, one of his followers, and I thought, if I was literally a servant of capitalism, that would mean I was a household employee of a man who goes by the name imperialism. If a guy named imperialism hired me to clean his house, then I would be literally a servant of capitalism or of imperialism, right? If some dude named imperialism hired me to be his household employee, I would be a literal servant of capitalism. But calling me a servant of capitalism and throwing literally in front of it, again, it doesn't make any sense, right? But I feel like his fans don't realize that. So, I mean, I don't know. He's got some videos on the internet explaining Maoist stuff and whatever. I don't know. Was hoping we could have more of a conversation, but then he just blocked me. Now, it has been brought to my attention that he is an advocate of people's war. Oh, goodness gracious, goodness gracious. First of all, people's war in the United States in 2021? Really? Really? Yeah, you want to talk about left adventurism and stupid? Okay. Also, if you were actually planning to do a people's war, wouldn't like the last thing you should ever do be to advertise this throughout the internet? I think one way we can be sure that Mr. Black Red Guard is not actually going to engage in people's war is because of the fact that he's all over the internet advocating people's war, right? That, again, people who engage in illegal, violent left adventurist activity, unless they are completely stupid, don't generally advertise on the internet that they are doing such a thing. So I don't think he really intends to engage in any people's war. But if you're not going to actually engage in people's war, maybe you should not be telling your audience and ranting constantly about the need for people's war, right? I mean, and then that raises the question, if he's not actually going to really engage in people's war, why is he all over the internet telling people to engage in people's war? And it starts to be a little bit nonsensical. And this is the problem with ultra Maoism, is it's like, okay, so, first of all, I don't believe in left adventurism. I believe in a peaceful democratic transition to socialism. Now, I know that the ruling class may not allow that to happen. And there may come a time where the people are forced to defend their organizations and defend democracy and to engage in self-defense. But now is not that time. Now we do have the ability to run in elections. We do have the ability to openly recruit people to leftist and socialist groups. So now is the time to advocate a peaceful transition to socialism. As that becomes, more and more of a reality, we may see the conditions change, but I advocate a peaceful transition. Okay, balkanized China like USSR. All right. So to be all over the internet advocating something that is genuinely quite stupid and problematic, number one, but then on top of that to really clearly have no intent of actually doing it, because if one was actually planning to do that, they wouldn't advertise it on the internet. What are you doing? I mean, what is he doing? What is he doing? I don't know. Can someone explain to me what Black Red Guard is doing? I just don't know what he is doing. Now it's been pointed out to me that he is he did have an appearance on the Dr. Phil program. And I guess what it was about was his neighbors accused him of engaging in people's war against their swing set. Yeah, here we go. It's Dove Red. I'll just, yes, I've seen the clip that his neighbors accused him of waging people's war against their swing set. They alleged that it was late at night and he went to their swing set and used fireworks to blow it up. Now, he maintained on the program that he did not blow up the swing set and that this was an example of racial prejudice. This was the stereotype. And they had this argument that I am sure will go down in history as one of the most important television conversations ever. I mean, it was epic. It was just epic. I mean, his neighbors were on there saying nasty things about him. He was saying nasty things about them. At one point, he said, you're mad because my mom's a convicted felon. Well, Martha Stewart's a convicted felon. Martha Stewart's a convicted felon. Would you be mad if she lived there? It was like just an epic exchange. I mean, this was just like highbrow television. I mean, I'm surprised they didn't win a Pulitzer. I'm surprised this didn't win like TV of the Year award, this conversation that they had. I mean, my goodness. I mean, I've seen some Jerry Springer episodes that were a bit better than that, but that was rare. I mean, never have I seen such good television between people shouting at each other like this. So maybe this is the beginning of the People's War is the swing sets, but maybe he didn't do it, right? Let's remember, right? Innocent until proven guilty. He did argue very vehemently on the Dr. Phil program that he did not actually blow up the swing set. And we also know that he advocates People's War all over the internet. So if he had tried to blow up the swing set as a strategy of People's War, he would have announced all over social media that he was going to do it first, because that's how he does his People's War. He announces constantly to the world that he's going to engage in People's War. So if the swing set had been part of the People's War, he probably would have like announced that he was doing it. I suspect there would have been a video with some people like ski masks over there. On the name of the revolutionary Marxist Leninist Maoist front of the, Red Guards of Minnesota, we hereby destroy the swing set in the name of the revolution. All socialist countries are fake. All people who believe in socialism are actually Nazis. We are the one true revolutionary party, and this swing set has met its end. And then kaboom. I mean, it would have been, it would have just been epic. So I have a feeling that if he did blow up the swing set, it was just a childish act in a fit of rage. And there's a very good chance he didn't do it. What I think is interesting is why did he agree to go on national television to talk about this disagreement he had with his neighbors? I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, you ask him, right? I mean, I'll tell you this. I'm disappointed. I would love to debate Black Red Guard. I would bring him on this channel anytime. Anytime. And if he's watching or if his supporters are watching, they should know that. While I vehemently disagree with his viewpoint, I think he's absolutely wrong in advocating left adventurism and supporting Elson Darrell Lemos, I would bring him on this YouTube channel for a debate, for a conversation, anytime. I would do it in a heartbeat. The second he said to me, I'm coming on your channel, I would say, boom. We'll do it. We would set it up. I would bring Black Red Guard on this channel anytime. I mean, name and time. I would have him on here. I've got way more, Twitter followers than he does. I would bring him on here anytime. Anytime. Black Red Guard, you are welcome to come on here. We can talk about whatever you want. You're welcome to come on here. We can talk about me being a literal Nazi and how that's like mathematically and, astronomically impossible. We can talk about whatever you want, Black Red Guard. You're welcome to come on here. I'm not too impressed with you, honestly, and I'm disappointed that you blocked me, and I didn't realize we were going to have this back and forth. And I could have done without some of the sexual harassment I received on Twitter. A number of his fans decided to send me, obscene pictures and all that. Again, proving what intellectual giants they are, right? I mean, it's like Vosh fans are also geniuses. And Skippy the Bear, his fans are also geniuses. When you debate me and then all your fans send me pictures of genitalia and feces and all that, it always reinforces in my mind how brilliant you are, just how brilliant you are. So, it always makes me have such a high opinion of you, and it always makes me respect you intellectually. So please, by all means, that's what you got to do. If you have a disagreement with me on social media, you have to mobilize all your friends to send me, gross or sexual images on Twitter, because that is just a way to really win my respect. It really, always, whenever people do that, I always just think, wow, the person who is doing this is a genius. So there you go. There you go. But hey, what can you do? What can you do? This is social media drama, and this is what I was complaining about. I spent the full first hour of this stream complaining about exactly what we're talking about. Okay, Maoist in the 21st century. All right, talking about exactly what we're talking about here. About how awful and toxic social media is. And here we are. I mean, this is a great example of how awful and toxic it is. But because this is what I can do, folks, I mean, I can't be a member of any political party or any organization. I've had a falling out with a lot of people on the left. I'm trying to get to the masses, trying to build a think tank. We're in the middle of a pandemic. This is what we can do, right? This is what we're reduced to, is we're having conversations about swing sets blowing up and black red guards and Twitter harassment. And oh boy, we can do better than this, can't we? Can't we do better than this as a movement? I mean, this is like comedy. This is like, it's funny. I mean, it's entertainment. It's certainly entertainment. It is certainly entertainment. I will give you that. BreadTube, I'm working on this book on BreadTube, and I'll finish the point because we got a bunch more super chats to get through. I'm working on this book on BreadTube, right? I'm working on the BreadTube book, the epic masterpiece BreadTube book. And the more I look into these people, Socialism Done Left, and Skippy the Bear, and Jabba the Vosh, and oh my goodness, right? Natalie Wynn, ContraPoints, and my goodness. I mean, Destiny, and Caleb Kane, and oh my God, H-Bomber Guy. Oh boy, folks. BreadTube is really, this is something else. I mean, whee. My goodness. Lenin, he writes, Proletarian Revolution and the Renegade Kautsky. And Caleb writes, Proletarian Revolution and the Renegade Skippy the Bear. Oh boy. Yeah, we've certainly come pretty far downhill as a movement. Folks, part of the reason these folks don't like me, and I'll just say this, is because I am an advocate of what I call suit socialism. I don't think that average people should think of socialists as a bunch of freaks. Okay? I think that we should look like the most upstanding, patriotic, loving community people around. I think we should wear suits and ties if we're men, dresses if we are women, and we should have people look at us like we're the kind of people that they would vote for to run the government, right? We should have a situation where people look at socialists and communists and think, my goodness, I would like to have these upstanding, high-achieving, friendly people run the government someday. I mean, it's just kind of basic, I mean, if you were running for city council and you were a serious candidate, you would not want to look like a crazy lunatic. You might do something to stand out and get attention, but ultimately you would want to look like you're an upstanding citizen. Met Gorbachev. If you're an upstanding citizen, you would want them to think that you are the kind of person who they would like to be in control of big decisions about the government. That's generally what we should do. I think that we should be responsible, upstanding, constructive people who put forward a coherent, clear message about how to rescue the country from the hardship and transition to a socialist society. And so that makes me an advocate of what you could call suit socialism, right? Because I want us to be coherent in the way we speak, and I want us to look respectable. Now, some people, I've noticed that, like, that kind of stuff is what really irks people the most. I've noticed that. It's weird. You would think I'd get more blowback on, stuff, but that just gets under people's skin. Right? It just gets under people's skin when you say this. People become socialists because they're looking for a commodified identity. They want to be able to wake up in the morning and put on socialist shoes and listen to socialist music on the way to the office. And they want to be known by all of their coworkers as a socialist. They want all their friends to think that's socialist Bob over there. It's this commodified identity that people are paying money, basically, more or less. I mean, maybe they're just consuming and you get ad revenue, but it is a commodified identity, and people want to be able to say, "I'm a socialist," and socialists dress this way, talk this way. That's not real politics. Not real politics. Not real politics. That is 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 not real politics. That's not real politics. That's not real politics. That is not real politics. Look, be yourself, okay? If you're a gender non-conforming individual, if you're trans, you have the absolute right to be who you want to be, dress however you want to dress. If you are somebody who just doesn't like ties, don't wear a tie. If you are somebody who just doesn't like suits, don't wear a suit, okay? I'm not here to try and force people to be what they aren't. I'm not here to bully people. I'm not here to put people down or degrade people or tell them they have to suppress who they are. That's not the game I'm in. I don't do that kind of thing, right? Trust me. As somebody who grew up in a small town full of very, very, very sheltered and closed-minded people, the last thing I would ever want to do is try to tell somebody, you must dress this way, and if you don't dress this way, I'm not going to do that. I don't do that. But I'm saying that as a socialist, as a socialist, as a socialist, as a socialist, wrote it down. As a socialist, we should try to adopt a more effective winning aesthetic. We should try to look like we are strong. We should try to look like we are disciplined. We should try to build community. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. This gets under people's skin. Gets under people's skin. So there you go. That was a long answer to the Black Red Guard question, and I'm sure it'll be clipped and taken out of context, and I'll get more hate spam on Twitter and whatever. I don't care anymore. At this point, folks, I don't care. I really don't care that much anymore. I've been canceled so many times, and I just kind of keep going. I really don't. I just, whatever. I don't care. All right. Emmett Till. In 1954, Emmett Till, a young African American man, I believe he was 14 years old. He was accused, and then you get some people who say, well, you should call him a boy. Well, a white person should never refer to a young African American as a boy. Because boy was used as a racial slur. Okay, so sometimes, I mean, it's like, let's be real. He was not an adult. He was 14 years old, I believe. But the word boy is not okay to use. If you're a white person, you should not be referring to any African American male as a boy. So let's just be clear on that. But he was from Chicago. He was visiting his family in the South. He went to the hardware store, and he was accused of whistling at a white woman in the hardware store. It's not clear if that ever happened. But regardless, the owner of the hardware store and his son came to the home and abducted him, and they beat him to death, tortured him to death, and they threw his body into a river. And when Emmett Till's body was found, I mean, he was murdered, he was killed. The mother of Emmett Till made a point of having an open casket at the funeral. And Jet Magazine and many other publications photographed the horrendous incident. At the time, Dwight Eisenhower, was it Dwight Eisenhower? Yeah, Dwight Eisenhower. Was it Truman? Who was president? It was either Truman or Dwight Eisenhower. I can't remember which one it was. The president of the United States, right? Received a telegram from the parents about what was done. and he ignored it. There was a trial for murder of the murderers, and they were acquitted in an hour. The murderers, they claimed that Emmett Till was still alive, which he clearly wasn't. And it wasn't a real trial, it was a sham trial. The murderers walked away, and got away with killing this young African American man. And the whole world saw that photograph because socialist countries and anti-imperialist media took that photograph and they sent it all over the world. Um, and they sent it all over the world. All over the world, they sent that photograph. And you know, um, it's quite interesting because the Soviet Union had made a point of publicizing racism in the United States. A few years before that, We Charge Genocide, which was a petition written by William L. Patterson, Ike, right? Dwight Eisenhower, right? There was a petition. Thank you, Red Illuminati. There was a petition to the UN called "We Charge Genocide," and it called out the USA for Jim Crow segregation and racism. And it was, presented at the UN as an official document. And the Communist Party sent its members out to sell copies of this report on Jim Crow segregation and the treatment of black people in America, called We Charge Genocide, to sell it all over the country. And in many African American communities, there would be white members of the Communist Party standing on street corners selling We Charge Genocide. The Civil Rights Congress was an organization formed by the Communist Party that organized around cases like this. Um, yeah, I mean, the Emmett Till killing was really the very beginning of the modern civil rights movement, because after the killing of Emmett Till, that you had, the very first kind of talk against Jim Crow really, really blatantly by Democrats, Northern Democrats like the Kennedy family. And it was shortly after that you had the Montgomery bus boycott and the United Auto Workers Union, and the Victor and Walter Reuther gave support to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and having the Montgomery bus boycott. And it was the beginning of a national conversation around Jim Crow segregation. So, yeah, I mean, that was a historic moment for sure. Okay, next question. Drinking more unnamed orange beverage. All right. Social liberalism and social conservatism, right? With social liberalism having the upper hand, Chaya asked, will socialists and communists need to be socially conservative? No. No, I mean, you can't. I mean, look, there, there's a difference, I think, between social conservatism and community building, okay? Social conservatism would be like saying gay marriage should be illegal. Social conservatism would be like saying that abortion should be illegal, birth control should be illegal. You should have mandatory prayer in public schools, things like that. And I don't think any Marxist or socialist could ever advocate such things, um, especially not in the United States. I mean, it might be different if you had a country that had like a state religion of some sort. But the United States, we have separation of church and state. We are not a country that recognizes any religion. So to advocate, that people who are gay should not be able to marry who they love, that couples should be forced to to have pregnancies, even if they don't want to have pregnancies at the time, that women, to say that abortion is the equivalent of murder and to outlaw abortion. I mean, you couldn't be for any of that if you were a genuine socialist. Now, that doesn't mean, in my mind, that doesn't mean that there couldn't be people that were part of a socialist movement who thought that. But I don't feel that a socialist movement could ever advocate for those positions, right? That especially in the United States, where we have no state religion, that you couldn't really have a socialist movement that was putting forward socially conservative positions. However, that's different than social liberalism, right? You wouldn't be for atomization. You'd still be building community. So while I think we should build community, I don't think we could be socially conservative in the sense that it means in this society. right? I mean, look, as far as social conservatism means oppressing LGBT people, we can't be for it. As far as social conservatism means imposing state religion on people, we can't be for it. As far as social conservatism means, means the stigmatization of people because they don't conform, we can't be for it. However, we can be for building community, and that's a different. There's a difference with that. So there you go. Somebody wants to have me on their show, they should send me an email, calebmaupin@gmail.com. No spaces, periods, or anything. That's the best way to reach me. Send me an email, calebmaupin@gmail.com. Alrighty. Okay. Totalitarianism. Totalitarianism. Well, that's a concept. It goes back to the 1930s, and it was when people were trying to equate the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany. They had this concept. They were both totalitarian. It was Hannah Arendt who wrote the big book on totalitarianism, though she did not herself invent the term. And the idea is that there are some states that seek to control your actions. Those are autocratic states. But there are some states that seek to control your mind, and those are totalitarian states. Well, I think that the state we live in very much works to control our minds. The amount of influence that American intelligence agencies have over the media is not small. The fact that Hollywood movies are sponsored by military intelligence agencies. I think that the state in the United States, you know, the state in the United States, the state in the United States very much works to craft and control public opinion, very much works to demonize and isolate dissidents, like they did during McCarthyism, like they're doing right now. The way that they seek to stigmatize alternative media from around the world and such. So, if a totalitarian state is a state that seeks to control your mind, if you define it in that vague way, you could argue we live in a totalitarian state. Now, obviously, I think when they talk about the Soviet Union, they talk about Nazi Germany, they're arguing that this desire to control the mind is then backed up with brute force and terror. So, in that sense, we're not a totalitarian state. But even the concept of a totalitarian state is pretty vague. So, fall of USSR prevented. Okay. All right. Was the Nixon Watergate thing a setup by the CIA? Well, not in this. I think that Nixon actually did it. I mean, it's pretty clear that the Watergate break-in happened. The people doing it were absolutely, individuals who were doing what they were caught doing. I think that the issue is that Nixon was very much hated by the CIA. And so an incident that under another administration might have gotten, pushed under the rug, got a huge amount of attention, was ultimately used to bring down the administration of Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon was very much at odds with a lot of the liberal establishment and the intelligence agencies. And the New York Times, the Washington Post didn't like him. There are other presidents, that did things like Watergate and didn't face as much consequence in the media. And we know that now. We know that there were all kinds of things. There are all kinds of scandals that have gone on. I mean, John F. Kennedy, apparently they would bring women to him every night at the White House for him to have sex with. There was just like, they were just bringing women into the White House all the time for John F. Kennedy to have sex with. I mean, is that a scandal? I would say so. I mean, there are many, many scandals. I mean, you can read some of the gross stuff about Lyndon Johnson and what a jerk he was. I mean, read about just the way he would treat his staff and the things Lyndon Johnson would do that are quite despicable. Do politicians spy on each other? Yes. Right? Do corporations spy on each other? Yes. They call it industrial espionage. So, the Nixon events, look, I mean, it's really awful what Nixon did. But there have been many other presidents that have done awful things and not it didn't get dragged through the media and ultimately lead to that president stepping down. I think that's what's particularly unique about the Nixon scandal. And there was a big divide in the ruling class. And I point people towards the book The Yankee and Cowboy War by Carl Oglesby, which gets into much more detail about that. And it shows that Nixon was very much aligned with the military industrial complex and more independent figures in the lower levels of capital. And that, he and the FBI were kind of waging a war against the Eastern establishment, against the Rockefellers. And actually, there are some interesting details, about that. For example, on one of the Watergate tapes, if I'm not mistaken, Richard Nixon says something like, I've got to resign now because people are going to start asking questions about Bay of Pigs. What did that mean? Right? Well, something was going on. Richard Nixon was involved in planning the Bay of Pigs invasion, which then started right after Kennedy became president. Nixon was the vice president, and then when Kennedy took office, the Bay of Pigs invasion happened. He was involved in planning it. And I believe Richard Nixon on one of the Watergate tapes says something to the effect of, I've got to step down now before they start asking questions about Bay of Pigs. So what went on? What is he referring to? He obviously did something during the Bay of Pigs, the planning of the Bay of Pigs invasion. He did something that he didn't want people to know about. We don't know what it is. Did he sabotage the Bay of Pigs invasion in the hopes of, embarrassing Kennedy? It's possible. Did he, we do know that to carry out the Bay of Pigs invasion, the U.S. government was working very closely with the mafia, right? And John Gotti and the, various Italian mafia folks in Miami and stuff were heavily involved, the CIA and the mafia were working together, and that organized crime was heavily involved. We also know Richard Nixon was very close to Jimmy Hoffa, which is fascinating. Jimmy Hoffa was a labor union leader of the Teamsters Union, who was very heavily involved in the mafia, but was a Republican. He was a conservative. He'd been trained by Trotskyite communists in Minneapolis, right? Farrell Dobbs and James Cannon. The Trotskyites had trained Jimmy Hoffa. But ultimately, Jimmy Hoffa was a Republican, and Richard Nixon and Jimmy Hoffa were very close. And Jimmy Hoffa was very involved in organized crime. So we really, there was a lot more going on there with Nixon. AFL-CIO supported Nixon, but the Teamsters also supported Nixon. And we don't really know. I mean, there you go. Alrighty. Okay. Someone says their local DSA does nothing. Well, I be careful with that, okay? I understand your frustration. I hear you, and, I don't know where you are located, sir, who says your local DSA does nothing, and I'm sorry that you have that experience. I'm sorry that they shot down your idea of mutual aid. I think the DSA is a great place to meet people, right? In a lot of areas, especially, if you're not in a major city, if you're in an area where there's not a high concentration of leftists, joining the DSA is a great way to meet left-wing people and point them toward better politics and point them toward, actual anti-imperialist socialism. So I would encourage you not to give up on your local DSA. I would encourage you, however, to get involved with the Center for Political Innovation, which is a think tank. That's what I would advise you to do, right? That's what I would advise you to do. Because the Center for Political Innovation, we are trying to agitate the agitators. We're trying to influence the influencers, right? We're trying to save socialism so socialism can save America. So if you get involved with the Center for Political Innovation, now, I would like the Center for Political Innovation to be doing a lot more. Right now, we're having a pandemic, so that's kind of got us a little bit frozen. But we got some pretty big projects in the works. We're having monthly web conferences. We're going to have some meetups over the summer. We're printing some books. We've got some new books in the works, and we have book distributions. And we're going to be having public forums as soon as that is allowed due to pandemic restrictions. And we're going to be doing street outreach to get people to go to these things. So I would encourage you to stay in your local DSA so you can meet people. Despite your frustrations, but also join the Center for Political Innovation so that you can be part of a project to save socialism. That's my advice to you, sir. And, there you go. Okay. Okay, why do anti-imperialist nations art not have the impact like Hollywood? Well, you're not exactly. It's not exactly correct, right? I mean, look, I mean, the Soviet Union had a huge impact on art. Shostakovich, Sergei Eisenstein. People still watch Soviet films. China. I mean, the Cultural Revolution in China had a huge impact around the world. I mean, look how many paintings of Mao and how much the Maoist stuff influenced the world. But yeah, right now it's true. Hollywood has a bigger impact. That's because the West, has been in power for how long? I mean, the West dominates the world in these terms, right? Silicon Valley and the internet is centered around the West. But that's changing. I think that's changing. And look, there are Russian films that are on Netflix you can watch, Russian series and such. And I think that may shift. Um, I mean, China, they're working on what they call the Oriental Film Complex. They're trying to build up the Chinese alternative to Hollywood. Um, and things are changing. Things are changing, right? It's much easier, it's much cheaper to make things like movies and television shows than it used to be. We do know that the CIA has a long history of manipulating Hollywood, and you can read all about that. I mean, the Congress for Cultural Freedom and the CIA, they had people on the boards of studios, and there's a whole history about that. So if you think that Hollywood is just politically neutral or something, I mean, give me a break. But there you go. Right wing governments of Latin America would massacre people and blame the guerrillas. That's why they weren't terrorists. For it. Wait, what? Okay, all right. I guess I'll just write down massacre people blame guerrillas. That's what I'll write down. Okay. Okay. All right. Social media and CIA. Someone asked about. Well, I will point you toward my book on Kamala Harris, where I quote New Yorker magazine, which talks about how during the presidency of Barack Obama, during the first year of it, there were protests going on in Iran. And Hillary Clinton sent Jared Andrew Cohen to Twitter on behalf of the State Department and urged them to operate in a way that would facilitate social media helping those protests happen in Iran. And Barack Obama heard about it and tried to fire Jared Andrew Cohen for this. And Hillary Clinton stopped Barack Obama from firing Jared Andrew Cohen. And that throughout the Obama presidency, throughout the Hillary Clinton State Department, when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, Jared Andrew Cohen was acting as the go between man between the State Department and Silicon Valley. And that Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and the State Department of the United States were constantly communicating with each other about how to operate during the Arab Spring. That was going on, right? And that's not contested, that's widely acknowledged. Um, so, I mean, the relationship is there, right? I mean, is it a direct relationship? Does the CIA call up Twitter and say, hey, Twitter? I don't think it works that way, right? But generally, I think that the U.S. government and U.S. foreign policy and the U.S. State Department and U.S. foreign policy goals do have a very big influence over the agenda. Look, I mean, it's pretty blatant sometimes. When they take certain people down, right? When people end up on sanctions lists by the U.S. government and then Twitter removes them, and I mean, it gets pretty blatant. I mean, look how they've messed with Press TV, and stuff like that. I mean, it's pretty obvious that social media has a relationship with the powers that be in the United States and with U.S. foreign policy. No question about it. No question about it. All right. Okay. Someone says the notion that society revolves around women. I mean, well, look. I mean, prior to class society, when people talk about what do they call it? Matriarchy. Prior to the origin of private property, you had a lot of these, hunter gatherer tribes that did worship a mother goddess figure, right? And that's where the term Mother Earth comes from, by the way. Did you know that? I mean, you hear Mother Earth, Mother Nature, Mother Earth. That actually goes back to pre-class society when originally, before the origin of private property, there were hunter gatherer tribes who went around hunting and gathering before agriculture was developed. And they tended to worship a female goddess figure who they believed was in the earth, right? It wasn't in the sky, it was in the earth, right? Before we had the sky god, we had the earth god. And the earth god was a goddess. It was the mother goddess, Mother Nature, right? That was what pre-class society believed, and that the fact that women had babies, gave birth to babies. Look, they talk about early primitive human beings didn't even know why women got pregnant. They thought women just kind of magically got pregnant. So they saw women because they could give birth as being magical and more spiritual than men. And so there was religions tended to worship a female deity. And older women usually, I believe, had the leadership roles in these hunter-gatherer tribes. And you talk about the term witch, right? We use this term witch. Now it's part of the Middle Ages. She's a witch. Burn the witch. Burn her. But you talk about the fact that in pre-class society, matriarchal society, women were considered to know what herbs to feed people when they were sick, etc. All right, Salvadoran Civil War. Oh boy. All right. All right. There you go. Okay. And yeah. Okay. All right. Next question. All right. Censorship in socialism. Well, as I have said many times, no society in history had talked about freedom of speech or freedom of religion until like the 1400s in Europe. And the reason for that was because freedom in any society is based on a level of development. When a society is very stable and not facing an insurgency or instability, generally people are allowed to say what they want. When a society is very unstable, things get much more authoritarian. When a society is very prosperous economically, generally people can say what they want. When a society is very poor and struggling, to accomplish people's basic needs, it tends to be very authoritarian. And that freedom is linked to a level of stability and a level of economic development. And that unfortunately, much of the socialist world has not been at the economic level and the level of stability to facilitate the level of freedom that we have in the West. Now, that doesn't mean everything's like you think it is, like you've been told it is on CNN. But no, I mean, do people have the same level of free speech in China that they have in the United States? No, they don't. Do people have the same level of freedom of speech that we have in the United States as they in Cuba? No. And there's a reason for that, which is that Cuba is blockaded and it's fighting for its life, and it's a different situation. Um, and that's really all there is to it. And if you want China to be more free, you want Cuba to be more free, get the United States off their backs. You know what I mean? Help facilitate economic development and prosperity there. Help Cuba to not be blockaded and not be tasting foreign subversion. And by doing that, you will create a situation where it'll be safer for them to open up and have more human rights reform, right? I don't get this. Conservatives and anti-communists have this notion that like this society doesn't have freedom of speech. So what we're going to do is we're going to threaten them with war, and we're going to cut them off economically, and make it so they can't purchase things on the internet. And we're going to make life in this island as hard as it possibly can be in Cuba. And that way, they'll have to have freedom. Is that how it works? No. When societies are under attack, that's when they lock down. So if you want people in China or Cuba or North Korea to be more free, you should want the USA to do more business with them. You should want them to have more freedom to blossom and grow. You should want sanctions against those societies to be lifted. It just doesn't follow, right? That hostility, economic warfare, threats of invasion don't make societies more free. So, freedom is based on stability and economic development, right? The goal of communism is to have a society with so much economic freedom, so much development, so little censorship, that the need for the government fades away, right? But that's based on vast economic abundance, material abundance, laying the basis for that. So there you go. Okay, cults of personality. Well, look, I mean, the cult of personality is a propaganda technique. And some people read into it. It's like, I mean, look, all the monarchies of the past were very much cults of personality. The king was the symbol of the nation. And he was the personality that was supposed to incarnate the nation. Um, right? Religion, right? You generally have individuals in the religion that are, deified or held up as ideal persons. And that cults of personality. Often corporations will have a very charismatic CEO who's the leader. Often, there are little cults of personality in life. A lot of families are cults of personality around the father or the mother, right? That the father or the mother kind of dominates the household. And all the kids want to be like the father or the mother, the father or the mother. That happens, right? And there are cults of personalities in little workplaces, right? You'll get a situation where somebody in the workplace gets all the attention, gets what they want, and everyone kind of tiptoes around them and all of that. And this is just kind of, it's a way human beings organize themselves, right? Is they tend to, when they're in groups, they tend to want to have somebody who's the boss, and they want to tend to, kind of idealize and hold up to scrutiny one person's personality while not holding up and idealizing and scrutinizing the personalities of other people. And that happens. It happens in all kinds of places, right? And there are healthier versions of it, and there are versions of it that are highly unhealthy, right? You think about, Jim Jones and people all, killing themselves. That's very, 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 very unhealthy. But, you think about, how people who work at SpaceX, they really like, what's his name? What's the SpaceX guy's name? That shows how much I care. The SpaceX guy, they really like him. They think he's a brilliant guy and he started the corporation. Well, that's probably a little bit more healthy. Um, Elon Musk, right? So, I think it's a sliding scale. I think the issue isn't, are there celebrities? Are there individuals that are iconized, etc.? I think the issue is are people doing it in a healthy way? Is this person using their power to be abusive? Are people, harming other people? Are people being encouraged to, do negative things? I think it's a sliding scale, right? On some degree or other, what you could call cult of personality is just the way people organize themselves. But there are very, 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 very unhealthy examples of the cult of personality, and there are very malign cults of personality, right? There's just, look, I really like William Z. Foster. My apartment, I've got two big pictures of him in there. I've got all his books. Is my home a cult of personality around William Z. Foster? Maybe. I don't know. I like William Z. Foster. I've read everything he ever wrote. Well, not everything. I'm sure there's many things I missed, but I have all of his books. I think highly of him. But am I going to go, commit some violent crime in the name of Foster to draw more attention to him? Of course not. Of course not. Of course not. Okay. All right. We'll talk about that. Victor Grossman. We'll talk about that. And, so it's like there are, it's just kind of, there are, examples of, again, a lot of these things in life are not, it's not like a light switch. It's not like, off and on. It's more of a shades of gray, sliding scale, right? And that, Khrushchev condemned the cult of personality around Stalin. That's where the phrase comes from. It's Khrushchev who originated that phrase. You have some communist groups that blatantly try to make one of their leaders, the great leader, and will work really, really hard to build, like a huge following for their leader. You have other communist groups that'll go out of their way not to do that, to the point that they don't even have, bylines on their articles. So, it is a question of how people organize themselves, I think. That's all. Okay. Next question. Kerala, the communist won. Yeah, the Communist Party of India, Marxist, which is part of an alliance with the Communist Party of India and some other groups, they were victorious in Kerala. They won the elections, and they have done a lot to win the trust of the people of Kerala. And they have done a great job handling the pandemic. And thank you, Joanne. Thank you. I had a great May Day. Look, the people of Kerala have really benefited from the healthcare programs that the Communist Party of India Marxist has set up, from the trade unions that they've facilitated. The Communist Party of India Marxist, I met leaders of that organization at the World Festival of Youth and Students. They're real revolutionaries. They're scientific Marxists. They're great. They're really, really great. And, again, If we could figure out how communists in the USA could be a lot more like the Communist Party of India Marxist, or the, or the Socialist Unity Center of India, or the Communist Party of India, right? If we could figure out how we could have responsible city building suit socialists in the United States, I think things would get a lot better, right? We need to be more like the communists of the developing world and less like crazy teenage LARPers. All right. Balkanizing China, strategy like the USSR. Yeah, I mean, the USA generally likes to, play up instability and, divide. I think in particular with China, China, the divisions in China, the balkanization of China, develop public speaking skills. All right, public speaking skills. All right. Oh boy, folks, you're taking it out of me tonight. But that's good. That's good. Whatever. You all are worth it. I love you all deeply, and you all are worth it. So, all right, balkanizing China. China, the way it was colonized for many years was as it didn't have a strong central government, right? When the British dominated China, they weakened the strong central government. There were famines, and they couldn't organize relief because there wasn't a central government that could mobilize food relief. There would be, every region was divided. And one of the great accomplishments of the Chinese Communist Party has been its ability to hold China together, right? And it's funny because this shows up a little bit in the movie Ivan the Terrible, which is about, the Tsar Ivan the Terrible. And again, both Russia and China, they are very, very big places with many different nationalities and regional identities and such. And that Ivan the Terrible, and there's dynasties in China that are very admired for their ability to bring the country together, and that ability to bring the country together generally results in life becoming more stable, and conditions in the country economically getting better. And so both Russia and China pride themselves on being together, and it seems like in both places, the United States, one of its strategies has been to try and destabilize by playing different national minorities and ethnicities against each other. In Russia, the primary thing has been with the with, what do they call it, the Chechens, right? And for a long time, the USA was covertly backing, along with Saudi Arabia, Islamic separatists in Chechnya. In China, you got Tibet separatism, you have the Tibet Civil War, you've got Taiwan, you've got that whole situation, you've got Hong Kong. So yeah, and that is there's a huge feeling in China, a strong feeling that there is one China, and that any attempt to break that apart would be very, very bad. And that's why many people are looking at the situation with Taiwan and worrying about how things could develop. Because if Taiwan were to declare that it's not part of China, were to try and declare it's not China, that there may be a situation where China would retake Taiwan forcibly, and that would that's not a good situation for anybody, but it might happen. And based on that, that may be the strategy of the United States, is to try and create a situation where China feels it has to retake Taiwan, and then they can accuse China of being the aggressor. So there you go. Okay. How do you be a Maoist in the 21st century? Well, I'm not a Maoist. I mean, I read Mao. I study Mao. I think Mao is a great revolutionary. He's someone that we can all learn from, but I wouldn't call myself a Maoist, because I live in the United States, and because I think Mao was wrong about some things. I mean, the Cultural Revolution was a nightmare. I'm sorry, it was. I mean, his foreign policy, the theory of three worlds, Soviet social imperialism, that was all wrong. Mao was a brilliant political organizer and strategist in China at the time he was alive. Mao's methods may, in some cases, be applicable to the United States, but in many ways they're not. You can learn from Mao, just like you can learn from Lenin, right? You can learn from Stalin. You can learn from Trotsky. You can learn from various anarchist figures. You can learn from Ho Chi Minh. We should study all of these leaders, but blindly follow none of them, right? That's my position. Now, someone asked, how do you be a Maoist in the 21st century? Well, I think in China, there is a rise of people that are like neo-Maoists, they call them, that argue that Mao Zedong thought and the teachings of Mao need to be more central in the construction of Chinese socialism in our time, and that there's been a straying from those teachings. And maybe there's something to that. I don't know. I'm not in China, and I'm not involved in the Chinese political process. But At the end of the day, to be a Maoist in the United States is silly, right? Just like you can't be a Kim Il Sungist in the United States, just like you can't be a Stalinist in the United States. You can study these leaders, learn from their successes, learn from their failures, but at the end of the day, you can't be an ist for somebody on the other side of the world and be a serious revolutionary in the USA. What would I do if I ever met Gorbachev? I would listen to him. I'd be curious what he had to say. I would think of some tough questions. But, I mean, Gorbachev has been in places I've never been. I mean, he was the leader of the Soviet Union. His policies resulted in the Soviet Union collapsing. But I can bet you he knows a lot more than I do about a lot of things. And having the opportunity to speak with him would be a huge learning opportunity for me, right? And that's how I've learned to see things. That whole thing in the opening, I talked about deep listening, right? That when you get an opportunity to meet somebody, rather than trying to impress on that person about how great you are or tell that person what they just need to hear, sometimes if you really want to benefit from the privilege of meeting a prominent person, the best thing to do is to try and listen to them and gain insights. I don't agree with Gorbachev. I think his policies were a disaster. But I suspect Gorbachev has probably thought a lot more about that than I do. And I would be curious to hear how Gorbachev defends his actions, how Gorbachev sees it from his end, and perhaps if there's some kind of insight I could gain into socialism, world leadership, and such from listening to Gorbachev. I would listen to Gorbachev. I wouldn't agree with Gorbachev, but I would try to learn from the experience. And that's what I would urge you to do, is when you have the opportunity to go someplace you've never been, to meet somebody with a viewpoint different than your own, rather than viewing it as an opportunity for you to stick it to them, maybe think of it as an opportunity for you to gain a new insight or gain something from it by listening to the other person. That would be my advice to you. All right, 21st century socialism in Russia. I mean, look, Russia, in a lot of ways, they've got, an economy that's largely centered around the government already. They've got, a state-controlled oil company, state-controlled natural gas company. There's a lot of, state central planning of the economy in Russia. They don't believe in Marxism, and there's a lot of, there's a lot of corruption, a lot of inequality. So I mean, Russia does not call itself a socialist country, but there are many policies in Russia that are socialistic. There's many people in Russia that are very critical of Western capitalism. So I guess you're asking, well, how would things be different if Russia were to have a communist party take power, or have one of the socialist groups take power? I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. I think that, it's interesting, the candidate for the Communist Party, Pavel Grudinin, his emphasis was on, he felt that with Russia's oil and natural gas revenue, there should be more of a social welfare state created for the population. And that's largely the argument that the Communist Party makes. They argue for more of a social welfare state, plus they argue for more anti-imperialism. They don't like McDonald's in Russia, things like that. So, again, the idea that Russia should be, more blatantly anti-imperialist, there should be more social programs, more of a welfare state. That generally is the themes that you hear from the Russian left. So if they were to come to power, I suppose that's what they would try to create. All right. Okay, could the fall of the USSR have been prevented? Yes and no. Oh my goodness. Okay. Advice going door to door. The fall of the USSR was ultimately the result of mass protests in Colombia. All right. Colombia. All right. All righty. Okay. The fall of the USSR was largely the result of a lot of problems the Soviet Union had. I've talked about the stifling of the intellectuals. I've talked about, the layers of unrest in the country. I've talked about the situation in the USSR was one where you couldn't have open debate. There was a lot of serious division beneath the surface, but rather than having an open debate about what was necessary in the country, everyone just kind of, all the debate happened like beneath the surface, kind of covertly. There were a lot of people in the Communist Party that didn't believe in communism. There are, and ultimately, I mean, the reason the USSR fell is that the faction in the Soviet Communist Party that didn't believe in communism, the pro-Western faction, was able to take power and throw in the towel. And the masses didn't have their back, even though the majority of people in the Soviet Union, voted to keep the Soviet Union, didn't want the Soviet Union to fall. And in fact, outside of Russia, among the other Soviet republics, it was much higher vote to keep the Soviet Union. The people didn't go out into the streets and fight for it. And how could that have changed? Well, ultimately, I mean, if you really want to talk about how it had been prevented, if that faction that dissolved, the leadership of the Communist Party that did dissolve the Soviet Union, if they had not done so, it wouldn't have dissolved. I mean, it was a political defeat. It wasn't an economic one. It was largely, I mean, there was a faction in the leadership of the Soviet Union that was dissolutionist, and they made the decision. And the faction, the rest of the leadership, what they called the hardliners, they didn't have the trust of the population. The population was not politicized. The population was not, going to go out and fight, to stop the dissolving of the USSR. So there you go. Okay. All right. Does this happen? In many countries in Latin America, you do have a situation where the government will massacre people and blame it on the guerrillas. That happens all the time. And vice versa. You'll have situations where, guerrilla groups will massacre people and blame it on the government, right? And that, that's, you read about counter gangs and fourth generation warfare. And yeah, I mean, this is how insurgencies and counterinsurgencies are fought. There's many examples of that. Absolutely. Many examples of this is actually the term false flag, and now it's a big conspiracy word. But in a military sense, it's something that happens a lot, where you wave, you have soldiers with the flag of the other side do something. That's, it's to create confusion, right? That's where the term false flag comes from. I know you're supposed to roll your eyes every time you hear false flag. I'm supposed to be like, it's a false flag. I'm Alex Jones. You're supposed to hear me say that, and then you go, oh boy, false flag. But the term, it refers to a real kind of military operation that actually has gone on in many different wars by many different countries. Alrighty, Salvadoran Civil War. That was in the 1980s. In El Salvador, you had communist guerrillas that were fighting against the pro-U.S. government. Nicaragua, you had the Sandinistas, which were, they were an anti-imperialist socialist government. In El Salvador, you had an insurgency by Marxist groups. You had the USA backing up the counterinsurgency forces. Nicaragua, you had the Contras that were fighting against the Sandinistas. In Guatemala, you had the Civil War in Guatemala during the same time. There was an armed uprising among the indigenous population, and the Rios Montt dictatorship committed genocide. There were insurgent groups in Honduras during this time. All throughout Central America, there was civil war. It was most intense in Nicaragua, I believe, but Guatemala had a civil war. El Salvador had a civil war. Honduras had civil war, right? That there was, Central America was a battlefield during this time, and communists mainly organized in the countryside. And and they fought for the peasantry. And there you go. All right. Next question. All right. Victor Grossman. Yeah, Victor Grossman was an American who defected to the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. And he talked about how, yeah, there was a lot less censorship, according to him, than we would believe in Western media. But yeah, I mean, there was censorship, but he argued that a lot of it was overblown. I have his book, and that the way we've come to perceive the really existing socialism of the Cold War era, I mean, is just overdone, propagandistic, and there you go. It's frustrating. All right. Where did I learn my public speaking skills? Well, clearly I learned them by going to a great university and taking a public speaking course. That's a joke, actually. No, I had an awful public speaking course when I was in college. Awful. I didn't learn a thing from it. I've learned public speaking mainly by doing it. You learn by doing, right? And I look back on speeches I gave years ago, and they're horrendous. But the more you do it, the more you learn. And I have a job where I talk on TV almost every day, and that helps, right? And I do these lives over and over again, and that helps. And ultimately, you learn by doing, number one. You learn by doing. Number two, you learn by finding speakers that you like and listening to them. How should tech company leaders defend? I have no idea, Austin. I have no idea. No idea. I don't know what I would say if I were a tech company testifying in Congress. I have no idea what I would say. I have no idea. I don't know what kind of argument would persuade the U.S. Congress. But yeah, find speakers that you like. And don't just listen to the content of the speech, right? And that's what a lot of people, you say, oh, did you like that speech? And they say, oh, yeah, I agreed with everything he said. Or no, I don't agree with him. Well, if you can start to listen to speeches and listen beyond the content, listen for the rhetorical style, the way the arguments are being framed, the way they're talking, the way it affects you, you can listen to the oratory as art and then practice doing it yourself. That's a skill. All right. This says advice going. What is it? Someone asked me for advice going. I have to roll it back and find out what the hell they were asking. Mass protests in Colombia. Advice on going door to door to talk about socialism. Okay. All right. Going door to door. Well, be patient with people. Listen to what people have to say and be prepared to calmly answer them. Right? That's my advice. It would be prepared to encounter a lot of hostility, be prepared to encounter people not knowing what they're talking about. Smile. I didn't miss your question, Austin. Smile. Yeah, how should tech company leaders defend doing business in China when testifying to the Congress? Austin, I have no idea. Smile. Be patient with people. Listen to what they have to say. And say, well, I understand why you might think that, but, and put it that way, well, that's actually not what we're about. Be patient. You must learn to patiently explain. That's actually a Sam Marcy thing. Sam Marcy said we should be able to patiently explain, right? And that's develop the art of patiently explaining. Patiently explaining. That's my advice. George Galloway is a great speaker. And yes, he is. George Galloway is amazing in so many ways, Joanne. Just an amazing person. And it's really been a privilege to meet him, to go on his program. I really have great admiration for George Galloway. Mass protests in Colombia. Yep, the Colombian government, which is U.S.-backed, right-wing regime, has been imposing all kinds of new austerity, and the people are not taking it, and it's a rebellion, and it's shaking the country, and you have no idea it's happening. American television is silent about it. They don't want you to know it. They don't want you to know what's happening. They're covering it up, because it's embarrassing. And just like in Haiti, there are rebellions happening against U.S.-backed austerity regimes, and nobody talks about it. The U.S. media is silent on it. Imagine if the people of Venezuela were protesting the way the people in Colombia are right now. They're silent on it. So there you go. All right, folks. I am exhausted, but it's a pleasure to talk to all of you. So I really care about all of you, and I do thank you all for taking the opportunity to engage with me here late tonight. You wore me out tonight, but that's okay. I'm happy to be on here and answer your questions. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression, but the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. Good night, folks.